to computer. All right.
Wonderful. Let's get started. So, firstly, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Claire, for taking some time out of your busy, busy day to join us for a bit of an interview so that we can all get to know not just our wonderful Future Female Leaders team, but especially, of course, one of our founders. So, to get us started, Claire, would you please be able to tell us a little bit about your background and what has inspired you to take on the path that you are on now?
Sure. Firstly, thank you for interviewing me. I am usually the one doing the interviewing, so this is like equal parts exciting and weird being on the other side. So I am a speaker, leadership and career coach, trainer, and author. And I am very privileged to work with individuals and organizations all over the world, essentially helping organizations keep their best talent and helping individuals to be the best talent that everybody wants in their teams. So I don't know if I don't know, I do know that I didn't wake up one day when I was 10 years old and decide that this is what I wanted to do. It was definitely a number of different experiences, I think, over my life that have led me to where I am. But I do know that I'm currently working in a space that sees me having more flow days, where time just flies by so quickly and you shut your laptop down at the end of the day and you just have that good juju feeling more than what I ever have before. And I think that that is because I found something that really gives me meaning in what I do. And it's taken me some time to get there. My background is 16 years in sort of HR, like human resources roles and communications based roles inside different organizations and different industries, from technology to resources, communications, retail and e-commerce. And I think I got to a point where I sort of stepped back one day and really asked myself the question of, like, when you're having those best days, those days that you really feel good, what were the kinds of things that you're doing? And then when you're having those days where you kind of don't feel that good, what were the things that I was doing? And that was the catalyst for me to really make some decisions around what I really wanted to do. And then ultimately was the catalyst for me to start my business in coaching and training and facilitation, because those were the things in my corporate roles that when I was doing, I loved. And that's kind of where I'm at today.
Yeah, it sounds like an incredible journey. What do you think the underlying passion is there when it comes to the coaching and the training? Like, where do you think that kind of comes from in terms of that filling your cup?
I think at core, I think I feel good when I am able to support and help others. Like, I think, like, at absolute foundation level, that's kind of what it is. But I
Mm.
also just I love creating spaces for and with people where they can just get off the hamster wheel of the day to day and just stop and think and reflect. And often, like, we don't allow ourselves to have those spaces. Whereas, enter a coaching conversation or training or, some sort of speaking engagement. It's like you're giving people the space to plant seeds or provoke them to think a different way. And when we give ourselves the space to do that, that is where, like, awesome things start to happen. So I think for me, that's like what fuels the fire. And just seeing leaders, particularly women, get, like, just be able to do the thing that you can see that they are so damn capable of, but for whatever reason and any number of reasons, both internally and externally with our, societal challenges, that get in the way of us being able to show up to our full potential. And I think, like, for me, there's just no better feeling than when you see a leader or somebody that you've been working with, like, unlock that, and all of a sudden they're just like, I see that now. I'm going to do that. And yeah, it's just like a drug. Love it.
It's incredible. It really seems like I suppose your passion really is facilitating that growth and that personal development
Mm,
in people and seeing that confidence
yeah.
grow and therefore their performance as well at work grow.
Definitely. And we know like when people are operating in organizations and they are using their skills, their talents, like their expertise, essentially, coupled with their efforts, like, and they're able to get results through that. Their enthusiasm skyrockets. They're a better team player. And then organizations win as a result of that as well. And so I like, could never understand why we wouldn't give people the opportunity to dig into themselves to best understand themselves so that they can bring that to their lives.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible work that you're doing. Must
Yeah.
be you must see like the team morale and the team culture really change and lift for not just organizations that you work with as a whole, but for the individuals you work with, for the people around them.
Mm.
Because you lift one person, rising tide lifts all ships, you know?
Yes, that's exactly right. And it's not, like minimizing in any way, like the very real challenges that
Mm.
people are facing inside organizations, like the overwhelm, the stress, the burnout, competing priorities, limited resources, all of those things are so real. Um, but I think that we can learn to show up in those environments in a way that still can best support us and our teams and still get results. We just often are lacking the time or the discipline to give ourselves the time to step back and do that.
No, that's very true. And I would love to know a little bit more about as
Mm,
well. You spoke about your long career journey in HR. How did you
mm,
originally get into HR? What did that journey look like? And were you at the same company for 16 years? Were you kind of moving around? Did you get to
yeah,
see this kind of impact on people, or I suppose see how different teams would respond to
mm,
certain situations? And that's what kind of inspired the work you do now.
yeah,
Yeah, just speak a little bit more to the initial start of your career.
sure. I definitely did not um, decide from the get-go that I wanted to be in HR. I remember when I was in year 10 going into year 11, so I was like 15 at the time, and I remember having a conversation with our careers counselor, and I remember him saying to me, Claire, your top subjects are drama and accounting. And I realized the irony of that. Um, your top subjects are drama and accounting. You should really consider career pathways in accounting and finance because they are the stable option for you. And I look back at that now and there are so many things wrong with that conversation, firstly, which I also write about in my book that, as you know, is coming out in a few months' time. I listened and I did go on and I went to uni and I started doing accounting and finance because apparently that's what I was good at. So therefore I should do that. And I did that for 12 months, wanted to gouge my eyeballs out. And then I made the decision to switch to still like in commerce, but to switch to marketing, management, and human resources based on the fact at that time that I was like what a lot of HR people do when they get into HR, I really like people, so I'll get into HR. And that is basically the catalyst for that. And I decided that I'd be happy either going down a marketing path or I'd be happy going down kind of a human resources path as well. Worked full time, studied full time in a small business doing marketing for the first 3 years. And in any small business, for anyone that's ever worked in a small business, you are like jack of all trades, master of none. So I was doing marketing coordination, I was doing business development, client liaison, like some voice over talent work, which is another story for another day. And I just was not feeling overly motivated or engaged in that role. So I did what many people do when they're 21, took a year off, went traveling. So I was in Europe for 6 months or so. And it was then when I got back that I actually decided I really wanted an opportunity in an organization that I felt like I could really grow in. So I was more specific about wanting a bigger, I wanted to try out a big organization. And at the time, whether that was marketing related or HR related, I actually wasn't that bothered. I ended up getting a job at FMG, Fortescue Metals Group, and I started as their HR administrator. And I so basically like started at entry level in a big organization. And within I think within about 12 months, 18 months of being there, I'd had 2 promotions, was moved to fairly like a mid-level role, but moving to site where your experience is just like condensed, like cram 5 years experience into about 18 months up there because you're living and working with everybody. And that was really my like thrown in the deep end experience into HR. And I just continued on basically from there. I moved to another organization, very different environment culturally. That one probably wasn't so much for me. And then at that point, I made the decision to move over east to Melbourne with my husband. Still stayed in HR, but moved into like a e-commerce and retail industry role, and just kind of slowly, stretching myself more and more each time, but still in the HR space. And then I ended up being in that role for about 6 weeks. So very new to Melbourne, very new to the industry, very new to the job, didn't know a soul there. And my manager at the time resigned, and they came to me and they said, "Oh, we think that you should do the job." And I was like, "Lol, does that mean I passed my probation period?" But I said, "Look, okay, I'll give it a go." They were an ASX listed company. So the department that I was in essentially was just rolling out initiatives from the head office. So even though I still had massive imposter syndrome, I was like, "There's no way I can do this." I was sort of like, "Okay, you've got the support functions everywhere in the central space. You're just facilitating it." And that was true until another week later, they said to me, "Oh, by the way, we're also divesting from the ASX listed company. We're being bought out by a venture capital firm, and they are investing millions of dollars in us to help us grow. So we need to rebuild everything from the ground up." So I'm talking like no payroll, no contracts, no recruitment, couldn't even post a Seek ad overnight. And that was really, and I was 26 years old at the time. And that was my biggest like intro into leadership, into management, into change navigation, into mergers, acquisitions, divestments, everything all at once. And still in HR. And that was without question, like the biggest career moment of my life so far, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you speak a bit more? Because that's a huge challenge to be faced
Mm.
with, to be someone, you're in a new city for one, so your support
Yeah.
system isn't there.
Yeah.
You are in a new role where you still are still kind of finding your feet a little bit. You've been offered this opportunity, which with your drive, I can see why you would just grab that immediately. How did you overcome all of those challenges that you faced at that point in time when this huge responsibility was just kind of dumped on you, I guess, a
Yeah.
bit?
Look, like not very well.
We're all
Like I'm
human.
not going to definitely not going to see her. I look back now. It's easy to look back on something, right,
Of
and
course.
see things more clearly having moved past
Mm.
it. But without question, and I talk about this a lot in workshops that I run, like I'm very open with people, like the first 12 months in that role, I was not the best version of myself at all. Like
Mm.
I had put so much pressure on myself to have to look like I had it all together because I thought that everybody else did. And I thought that that's what good leaders did. They look like they've got it all together. And meanwhile, on the inside, I'm like melting down. I wasn't looking after myself. I was crying most days. I was going to work most days waiting for the tap on the shoulder where my CEO would be like, "Nice try, Claire, but like this just is not working out."
Mm.
And my relationship suffered because of it. My health suffered because of it. I was just working harder and harder and harder, basically to, I think, avoid dealing with the feelings that I was having. But also I just thought if I just keep working harder and harder, I'll look like I can do this. And so, to answer your question, like I don't think that I navigated it well, at least not internally, at all. And I think I look back at that now, and the biggest pressure that I was putting on myself was that I thought that I had to be perfect, and I thought that I couldn't make a mistake or ask questions or ask for help or ask for feedback. And I ended up drowning in my own like negative prison that I'd created for myself. Um, and that, like, without question, is the biggest learning that I've had. And the day that I realized nobody knows what they're doing, they're just doing the best they can with what they have, was the day I think I finally decided to take off the weight of this backpack that I was carrying around. And then the irony of all of that is once I took the backpack off and the weight off, I actually just became so much better at what I did because I was able to just be me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but like
No, no,
I
it
don't know if
really
I did
does. I
deal with
think
it well. But I did show up every day. That I feel proud of. I showed up every day. I didn't give up. I did keep going, but I do wish, no, I don't wish, you learn, but the biggest learning is like being able to catch yourself in the moment.
What are some of the tactics that you, I suppose, employed to break yourself out of that negativity prison that you put it in? Because I know that
Yeah.
sometimes when you're so far under that veil and the pressure of perfectionism and the shame that that can
Mm,
sometimes bring as well, and you're carrying such a big burden, what are some of the steps that you
yeah.
took to try and break down that and just learn to be a bit more vulnerable and open
Mm,
in your position?
yeah. I, I don't know if there was anything at the time that I was doing deliberately to help myself because I think I was so in it. Um, and I probably just didn't have the tools. I hadn't been taught the tools to know. But in hindsight, the things that were helping me that I didn't realize at the time was I actually did have a coach. So I had engaged a coach, a leadership coach through the organization that I was with, who was phenomenal. And he knows that he is a absolute catalyst for me, not just in my career, but in my life to help me get through that. So again, it was someone that provided like that container of space to let you just sit in it, feel what you need to feel without judgment, but then also really challenge you to think differently. And, you know, that thought that you're having or that narrative that you're saying to yourself that you suck and you're terrible and everyone hates you, like, do we know that that is true? Like, could there be some other truth? Like, they really challenged me. And I think slowly over time, just broke down the barriers that I was not able to do, like, to myself on my own. So that was the first thing. I had a coach. Secondly, in hindsight, I absolutely also had a mentor who was sort of like a wiser older gentleman who we just happened to operate on a lot of projects together, and he was also quite significant in helping me get through that period, and would just share, you know, his lens on things, or would give me the pep talk that you needed from time to time, or share with me about the experiences that he'd had previously where, you know, he'd failed and what he learned. And so that helped normalize that. So I guess surrounding yourself with the right support structure is really important. And I think what I now do is remind yourself that like this too shall pass. And so whenever I have an experience now, which I do all the time, where I'm like, oh God, this is new, it's a bit scary. Can I do this? I'm so uncomfortable. I look back at all the scary, uncomfortable things I've done before and been like, you had the same feelings then too. And look at what happened. So how do you like bottle that up and remind yourself that you're just experiencing this, what you've experienced in the past. So I think those are probably, and then of course there's all of the, I don't, don't even want to go into all of the things we know around healthy diet, sleep, meditation. Like we know those things. They are really important. When you're in the thick of it though, knowing and doing are not always the easiest thing.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think the first thing to go when you're under a huge amount of pressure or stress is the healthy habits, but it's so ironic because it's the thing that you need the
Oh,
most at that point in
yeah,
time.
absolutely. And I think it feels like when you're in the thick of it, like just another thing that we have to add to what feels like our
Mm.
overflowing days. So it just adds, it feels like it adds to the overwhelm. Whereas what I try to do now, instead of thinking that everything has to be like, I don't have to go and do an hour meditation. I don't have to go and do yoga for an hour. I don't have to go for an hour run. Like 2 minutes to stop, close my eyes and breathe is still better than nothing and
Mm.
actually ends up making a huge difference. So I found that quite helpful. Like, stop thinking that because everyone's just pushing all this stuff at you about how to, be calm and healthy, like it has to be these huge chunks of time. That just stresses people out more. I'm like, how do you find the micro moments, the 2 minutes that you can breathe? You could go to the bathroom and breathe, right? Like there are, you could close your eyes and and hold your hot coffee before you sip it and just breathe in and breathe out. And that in itself can make a difference and is achievable.
Yeah, that's very true. I noticed Atomic Habits is a book that's sitting on the bookshelf behind you, and I know that that is a book I personally love and I've recommended to so many people. I've got two
Mm.
copies. I've no idea where they are. They're with friends and family. Can't remember who I've given them to, but that's one that speaks a lot
Yeah.
to it. You do not have to do the full hour run. Put on your
Yes,
shoes, run to your letterbox if you really want
exactly.
to. And if you're feeling like running further, do that. But do not put this huge weight of expectation on you,
Yeah,
on yourself.
exactly. It's the one percenters, the
Mm.
consistent one percenters. That is really what is sustainable.
Mm.
It's not the big sweeping things that we do one time. Well, I went to the gym one time, I pumped iron, like, why am I not ripped yet? As opposed to getting up every morning and doing 5 push-ups. That's going to yield you a better return over time.
Mm. No, that's so true. And you mentioned as well that keeping the phrase in mind, this too shall pass, has really kind of helped you in those scary, uncomfortable
Mm.
moments or those really big challenging moments. If you don't mind me asking, what are some other big challenging moments that you've gone through either before or after that period in time?
Yeah. Um, Definitely. So in that corporate role that I was moved into as well, I dealt with some horrific people issues and some horrific
Mm.
challenges that still stay with me. We had a couple of suicides during my time, like not on at work or anything like that, but
Mm.
um, from people that I worked with, and that was incredibly tough emotionally, but then also needing to be the one of the key players, having to go and tell colleagues what had happened and providing them support, and that was really challenging. I also had skin cancer in 2019, and that for me was a huge moment and catalyst for having discipline and having boundaries, because I didn't have a checkup, even though I knew I needed to. And that story of how that came about is another story for another day. My sausage dog was the one that actually sniffed it out and was the catalyst for it all.
Wow.
Um, and I prioritized work. I prioritized being busy. I was that person that was like, I don't have time to go. It's fine. I don't have time. I don't have time. I'll get it done another time. Time went on, time went on, time went on. Finally did go because my dog kept rubbing his nose in it, literally. And my mum was like, you need to book an appointment. There's research that dogs sniff out illness. And then she was the one that pushed me to do it. And that's what it ended up being, which was terrifying. I had to have surgery, and now we'll have very regular skin checks for the rest of my life. That was scary. 2020, we all had a year in 2020. For me, my husband and I sold everything we owned at the end of 2019, both quit our jobs, and we decided that 2020 was the year that we were going to take off and travel the world. Obviously did not go according to plan. Long story cut short, we ended up being caught on a very small sailing boat out at sea for 10 weeks, rationing food, spam, powdered potatoes, sharing with two other people, so 4 people on 42 feet of floating space out at sea. That was definitely a character building, resilient building moment, and a lesson in that sometimes your plans don't go the way you want them to. So how do you kind of grieve? Because we don't just grieve when we lose people. We grieve when we wanted something really bad that didn't happen too. How do we grieve, accept the new reality, and then lean fully into it? And yeah, those are probably, I mean, there's plenty more. There's some big ones that I'm navigating right now, which I'm probably not quite ready to share yet. But I think the reality is, like, we grapple with difficult situations through every chapter of our life. It's not about will we, it's about we will. How do we support ourselves as best we can through all of those experiences? And
Yeah.
every day, some days we do it really well, some days we don't. And that's okay. It's what makes us human.
Yeah. It seems as though even when you started speaking about your journey, saying that, yeah, I was studying full time and working full time, which is that's no small feat. That's burnout waiting to happen. That is just absolutely insane. And then jumping straight into your career and these big roles with big responsibilities, and then selling everything. It seems as though you're a very, very driven person, but the journey to learning to prioritize you and your health is a very, very important one when
Yeah,
you have that level of drive too, because it can
totally.
overtake you at some points where your body's like, well, hold up, I actually can't keep up.
Absolutely. And, there's a huge part in all of that too, which I've gotten a lot better at, but it's taken me some time. And we touched on it very briefly earlier around, like, how much of our worth and our identity can be tied up in what we consider as being productive. And so when you start to step back and look at the bigger picture and prioritize yourself and your health and your well-being, that can feel very difficult at first, and almost like you're being lazy, or, I'm not working hard enough, or all of these things, because we're so used to getting our those feelings of worth from ticking things off our to-do list, which is actually not very helpful because there's so much more to being productive and effective than just ticking off tasks. In fact, if we're only ever just ticking off tasks, we're probably not very strategic, and we're probably not very creative, and we're probably not able to be very innovative because we're so in the weeds of the doing. So, like, that in itself has been a real reframe for me, like both from a health perspective and like a wellness perspective, but also so that I can actually do better work when I am
Mm.
working. The irony of it all is funny how you're actually better at your job when you have energy to be better at your job.
That's crazy.
Who knew?
Yeah, that's amazing. What is your approach
Mm.
in how you go about your daily life that allows you to be effective versus productive?
Don't, I think anyone who thinks that they are perfect in this space, like, I call BS on that, right? So I think that's the first thing to say is have intention, have structure, be disciplined, but don't berate yourself either when life gets in the way, because life does get in the way
Mm.
sometimes. But I think for me, in order to be effective, some of the things that I've found have really worked well is time blocking. Like, I swear by time
Mhm.
blocking. And what I mean by that is, if I say, if there's something that hits my inbox and I'm like, I don't have the mental space or the capacity to do with that now, but I know I need to, and that's going to take me, I think, maybe an hour or so. Okay, great. Where are you going to find that hour? Now go put it in your calendar, block out an hour so that you can let that out of your brain, knowing I've got space created for that. Whereas previously I would like read emails. Oh, I can't deal with that now. So I'd mark it again as unread, come back to it again. I'd read it again. Oh, I can't deal with that now. So I'd mark it again as unread. And by the time you finally got around to doing the task, the amount of time you wasted just thinking about the task and rereading the email about the task, you probably could have got it done. So time blocking, I swear by. Being very aware, like at the end of every day, I already know the 3 things that I need to do for the next day. So I never get to my desk in the morning, turn everything on and go, feel like doing today, like what I need to do. Like I already know. It's on a post-it note in front of me, 3 things written that I need to do. And then also really checking in with myself. And this has taken me time and I'm still not perfect at it either. That piece around like, is this a needle shifting item that's really going to help you move your business forward? Or if you're in an organization, move your team forward, move your organization forward? Or is it something that's just going to make you feel good because you want to tick it off your list? And sometimes that's okay. But if we're spending all of our time just in that, we aren't actually focusing on the things that are really important to move things forward inside our business, our organization. So those are probably the main things for me, like time blocking, zooming out to zoom in. And now I can't even remember the other thing that I said, time blocking.
Being aware at the end of the day, like
Oh,
you
yes,
know
that's right.
what
And
the
the 3
three
things
things
on a
you need to
post-it
do.
note.
Yeah.
Yep. 3 things on a
Yeah.
post-it note at the end of every day and then tackle them first.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I feel like all of those strategies are also so incredibly applicable to study as well, whether you're in high school or whether you're in
Totally.
university. Those can be life changing for being able to just really relieve stress when it comes to your study workload and just be able to give yourself more thinking space, because when you're not so stressed, you can absorb information a lot better too.
Spot on. Because you think about it, right? Like every time you have a thought, whether it's, oh God, I've got to go to the shops and buy milk. Oh, I've got to pick up my daughter's, ballet shoes from the store. Oh, I've got to study for that exam. Oh, that's right. I've got to get back to that person on email. If you aren't doing something with that, right? Capturing it, creating space for it, like having a plan for it, it is literally chewing up bandwidth. And so that's why people get to that space of the overwhelm, is because all of our like mental capacity has been filled up with all the tabs that we have open, but with no structure created around them. So by creating that structure, you get them out and you free yourself up to be able to focus on things that are more important and relax when you're saying to yourself, it's my time to relax now, instead of half holding on to all of these things that you've got to try to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like dedicating time. My partner and I, we discuss a lot about shoulds and coulds. So it's the feeling of, I can't relax. I should be doing X, Y, Z. I should be studying for the exam. I should be working on that tender, whatever it is, rather than changing your mindset a little bit to coulds. So I could right now, because this is my allocated time to chill, I could watch the Netflix, I could go for a walk, but I shouldn't be, working on the tender or doing work or doing study, because this is my time to relax. It's like, it's shifting your mindset a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And should is one of the worst words in the dictionary. It causes us so much unnecessary pressure, stress, self-talk, comparisonitis. I should be like this. I should do this. I should be like them. I should, do more, own more, have more, be more. I love that. Love that.
Yeah. And I bet that's probably a lot that probably led to the struggles you were having when you did get that big position at the ASX listed company, and then they just went through that massive organizational change. You were just drowning in shoulds, but we're all human. We're all imperfect.
So many shoulds, but those are the experiences that you learn the most from. And I think that those experiences, like putting yourself in those kinds of experiences, even though it's scary at the time, like as cliche as it sounds, like that is where the growth comes from. It's putting yourself into those opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. I found that throughout our conversation, I can see you've never been someone who's ever shied away from a challenging opportunity. You're like, oh, is that the most difficult path? Yeah, I'll take that one. Like, you're like, is that going to deliver the most growth? Yeah, I'll go for that one. Where do you think that drive comes from? Because you seem to have had it from the get-go, the drive, the motivation.
Mm.
Where do you think that really comes from?
I mean, look, I definitely don't deliberately be like, how could I make this as hard for myself as possible?
Well, that's good.
But yeah, like the hunger for sure. I think I've always been hungry. Um, I think my parents, like my parents ran a business my whole life growing up. So I've had a front row seat to the real challenge. They're, they ran it as a husband and wife duo too. So like I've seen the very real challenges that come from running a business. Um, but I've also seen like the reward that comes with that as well, and the flexibility that comes with that, the autonomy that comes with that, the carving out your own kind of space that comes with that. So I think my hunger has definitely come from them.
Mm,
I also think surrounding yourself with incredible friends and people that motivate you to want to be more. And when I say be more, I don't mean own more, have more, buy more. I mean just be a better human being. Um, and I think I've been really fortunate to grow up with and be surrounded by incredible women and incredible friends that um, have motivated me to stay hungry. Um, because yeah, I mean, what's the saying? The average of the five people you spend the most time with, or something. So spend them with people who make you feel good. Spend them with people who make you want to be a better human being. Spend them with people who can finish a conversation with and have that like good, warm heart feeling of like, yeah, I can do that. And I think that is what's made me hungry and kept me hungry.
What do you think some of the shared values are that you have with those, your close knit group of friends that keep you hungry and keep you motivated?
I think, think not forgetting where we've come from. I think that's a value that
Mm,
I have in common with my friends that I've grown up with.
mm,
Like we are all privileged in the sense that we always grew up with food on the table. We went to school, we had an education. I had a bed to put my head on at night time. So from that lens, we're very privileged.
mm,
Um, but we all came from families that like worked hard for everything that they had. It wasn't handed to them. We went to school, in working class suburbs with working class people. And even though now we might have great jobs and businesses that see us getting these incredible opportunities to sit in rooms with incredibly influential, successful people, I think the value that we all share is that we never forget where we came from,
mm,
and we get just as warmed hearts having conversations with people from all walks of life, because I just
mm,
want to know who you are and I just want to hear your story. I don't particularly care what your title is, like how much money you earn or how you earned it. I just want to know who you are as a human. So I think we share that value. Um, I think we share the value of like connectedness as well,
mm,
and like community and hunger. I think there is that hunger
mm.
to like be a good human. I'm not trying to like I don't know if that makes, I don't mean to make it sound simple, but like just be a good human being.
Mm. Yeah, I know. I think that that makes a lot. It makes sense coming from a working class family, and then having people with those shared values of that humility, that connectedness, that empathy, to just care for humanity as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely is shapes you into quite a special human being. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so next question is,
Mm.
um, and I we have kind of covered it a little bit with this,
Okay.
with what we've just been discussing, but I wanted to know if there's anything else that you use that keeps you inspired, creative, and innovative in your work.
Mhm. I think I, I mean, travel for
Mhm.
me, like without question, is the thing that always sees me re-energized, re-motivated, and that gets my creative juices flowing. So, like case in point, as you know, I just got back from Vietnam 2 weeks ago, where I was for nearly a month with my husband, and part holiday and then part book writing for me. And I got 80% of that book done in my time there because it just started flowing. And I attribute that to like a change in scenery, a change in environment.
Mm.
I think when you are immersed in a new culture and a new way of living, there's perspective that comes into play. There is, your mind gets opened. You get inspired because you just look at how people do things and you're like, how have I never thought of this before? So travel for me, again, I know it's a privilege to be able to do that, but travel anywhere, right? Like not even necessarily far. Travel just sometimes I'm just like, I'm going to go sit in a cafe that I've never been to today to change up my environment. And that I find it always seems to bring on creativity, innovation, and inspires me. And then I think the second thing is water, like whether it's the river, the ocean, like being in it, on it, near it, around it. For me, I don't know, it's like it clears the bug splattered windscreen and
Yeah.
allows me to see things more clearly. So those would definitely be like the two things for me that I think keep me energized and inspired is travel anywhere, like 5Ks down the road to a cafe I've never been or to the other side of the world, and water.
Mm. Yeah, that's incredible. I feel like both travel is just so invaluable in the
Yeah.
learnings and the experiences, and immersing yourself in nature, particularly around water, is just so cleansing and so grounding. It
Mm,
really allows you to connect back in with your true self, which is, I suppose,
yes,
where that creativity flourishes.
absolutely. And my husband always says to me, like, I've been with my husband for 15 years, and
Wow.
when we had that year off together, we obviously spent a lot of time together at very close quarters. And and I remember at the end of it, I asked him, like, what's something that you've learned about me this year that you didn't know before? And his response was, I always knew how much you loved like water, but I didn't realize like what a different like version you become when you're near it. And I was like, I feel like that is kind of a compliment.
No, it
But
is.
and as in he was like, I get it now. He's like, to you, it's grounding, it's relaxing, it's like the spaces where we would camp or whatever eventually when anyway, we would be camping and we were, near the beach or the ocean versus when we were like right inland, just like red gravel roads. I felt sometimes a bit like claustrophobic. Whereas then when I was ocean, river, water, whatever, I'm like, ah. So yeah, something in that for sure.
Yeah, no, it is very magical. And I think, like, on that point as well, it's
Mm.
also really important to spend time understanding what your secret recipe is as well.
Yeah,
Like, you found that it's water
yeah,
for you. For some people it might be meditation, it might just be going for a
yeah,
walk, or it might
absolutely.
just be having a little corner in your home that is your little nook that you read your book there, and every time you go into that little space, like that's your moment. So it's
Yeah,
just finding out what
yeah.
fills your cup, I guess.
Spot on. And it'll be different for different people. And I think
Mm.
knowing that, I think you're so right, Amy. Like knowing what that is for you is then becomes like one of your resilience tools, right? Like, and
Mm.
as it is mine, like I know when I'm having those moments where I'm like, it feels like it's caving in, it's all getting a little bit too much. What do I need to do? Like, I've got my game plan. Like, I know the things that I need to do to make me feel calm. One of them is literally just going down to the beach, sit on the sand for 5 minutes, right? Like light a candle, cuddle my dog. like they're these things that to the next person might be like, okay, whatever. But to you, they're the thing that helps you keep going. And like once you know them, use them.
Yeah, absolutely. Those energy restoring practices are just
Yeah,
so crucial to be able to move forward in your life, but also your career as well.
totally.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so next question. Obviously, we know you being one of the incredible founders of Future Female Leaders, that investing in our future female leaders is a big passion of yours. Are there any other causes or missions that you feel really deeply connected to?
Think, this is a hard question because I think I like as a human, I care deeply, I feel deeply. So I do have a tendency to get quite impacted by things happening in the world.
Mm,
I see that as being to me, it's a superpower, it's a strength, but sometimes there's a derailing impact in there
mm,
as well, right? Like I'm a sensitive human, highly empathetic, but when you feel really deeply, um, you kind of feel like you want to solve
mm,
everything and you can't. So I think like I guess my answer to that question is like, yes, there's so many other causes um, that I feel so deeply about, like particularly everything that's happening at the moment with women all across Australia being killed. I
mm,
just cannot wrap my head around that and why the government isn't doing more around it. We don't need another inquiry. We don't need more conversation. We need action.
mhm,
Um, but I think I've had to make the decision around what are the small ways I can continue to support all the causes that I care about, whilst
mm,
also channeling as much of my energy as I can into the one that I guess I've decided is the one I really want to invest in, which is the
mm,
education, as you know, education and empowerment of our next generation, so that so that the spiral effect of that is that they then are also motivated, passionate, engaged
mm,
to have that flow-on impact of
mm.
helping to solve some of these challenges as well.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel that has impacted your business endeavors as well?
Oh, can I pause this for 1 second? Someone's just rung my
Sure,
doorbell.
it's
It's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. So, as someone who is so passionate about investing in and educating the next generation of female leaders, how do you feel, if at all, that has impacted your business endeavors?
I think the biggest impact it's had on me and my business has been the learnings that you get. And it's so interesting, like with the Future Female Leaders program, obviously, as you know, there's the mentoring component where a woman in industry is mentoring a participant, and so there's always this conversation around obviously the mentor is sharing wisdom with them, but in my experience, like I'm learning just as much from them around this next generation of leaders, what's important to them in the world, what change do they want to drive, like what skills and support do they really need to be able to do that, which then kind of fuels my own business and the way I operate as well. And I can take those insights and then play them into the organizations that I work with, tweak the programs that I run based on those learnings. You just have more insightful conversations, I think, because of what I'm learning from them just as much as what I'm teaching in return.
Mm. Yeah, education is so empowering like that.
Yeah.
This has that multiplier effect, like what you were speaking to earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's both ways. Like we are learning just as much as what we're teaching. And I think sometimes that's the missed element, because I think sometimes as we get older, we don't think we have anything left to learn. And that's an attitude and that's a choice. Whereas I try to keep very open to the fact that like these young ladies are the ones that are going to be running the world someday when I'm, in my far later years. I hope that will have raised them in a way where they're driving really positive change. They're supporting the older people like me when we get to that stage.
Yeah, I believe that they will.
I think so. If what I have seen through this program is anything to go by, they absolutely will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking to those young women in particular, what advice would you give to them for them starting out their career?
In their career, I think, oh, so many pieces of
So
advice,
many things.
so many. I think the one I would share, probably just because it's relevant at the moment with all the writing I've been doing, is two things. Firstly, you are not your job. Your job is one part of you. It is not all of you. So work out who you are beyond your job. That's the real you. And I think the second thing is that from a career advice perspective, when we start our careers, we want to do all of the things, we want to learn all of the things, we want to quickly climb the ladder or, get to the role that we want. And we have this vision or perhaps this aspiration of where we want to go. And I love that. I love the hunger and I love the drive. But remember that the success is actually in the journey. It's not at the final destination. And I speak to people all the time now in their 30s and their 40s who have worked so hard with a one-track mind in their careers, and they've got there. And now they're there. And they're like, I thought that once I got here, everything would change and I'd be happy. And I'm not. Why? And a lot of the conversations that I end up having with them are around like the journey along the way is where the growth is. It is also part of the success metric, but we're just so focused on the end goal that we forget that. So I think that would probably be my other piece of advice.
Yeah, it's really important not to have the if then mindset. If I achieve this,
Yes.
then I'll be happy. When I get to this point, then it will all come
Correct.
together and I'll feel
Correct.
nothing but joy.
Exactly. And when we do that, we spend our whole lives looking for the future of at which point I will be happy, I will be relaxed, I'll be whatever. And then before we know it, it's too late. And we would do
Mm,
anything just to have those moments along the way again. So enjoy them while we're there.
yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful advice. On that note as well, do you
Mm,
have a lesson or a piece of wisdom that has been impactful in your journey? So maybe something that
mm,
you have been told by your mentor, your
yeah.
coach, your mum, whatever form
Yeah.
that guide takes.
The one that comes up for me, again, probably because it's all been relevant to writing recently, is a mentor once said to me, Claire, no one will give you what you are worth. They will give you what they think you are worth. You are the one who controls their thinking. And I remember that conversation as clear as day because I was like, ow, how rude. um, because I needed to hear it because I was just caught up in a not good enough spiral. And yeah, that he said that advice to me, and that totally changed the way I looked at things and still look at things. Like I use that advice now even in my own business. I think it's relevant to
Mm,
everybody, irrespective of whether you run a business, you're in an organization, you're early in career, mid career, late career. Like no one will give you what you are worth. They will give you what they think you are worth. You control their thinking. And there's something empowering around that because in order for me, it's within my control, it's within my influence, but it means I've got to know my worth. I've got to back my worth and I've got to know what my strengths, skills, talents, and superpowers are in order to get others to see that too. So I think like that for me has been a huge catalyst of mindset shift for me.
yeah, it really forces you to break out of that imposter syndrome as well, where you're like, well, I really have to grow into my shoes here and I have to back myself
Yeah,
if I want others to back me.
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful advice. Um, Something else that we've spoken about quite a bit as
Yeah.
well, because it's been such a key part of your journey, is navigating that balance between career, professional life and your personal life. Do you have
Mm.
any tips for maintaining that balance?
Mm. It is an ongoing challenge for me. I mean, I would say I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably this last 12 months for me has been the best I have been ever in terms of creating more space for myself. Partly because I've had to, but also because once I started, I realized like, oh, great. Like I'd like to keep this going. So I think one of the things I've realized too was that like if you make yourself available for people all the time, you can't then be annoyed, which I used to be, when someone will book in time with you at a time that you would have preferred to be going to the gym or spending time with friends or relaxing. Like, if you don't hold a boundary, we can't then be annoyed when people step over it when there wasn't one there to begin with. So, for me, what that's looked like in a practical sense has been like reviewing even my availability with clients, with organizations that I work with one-on-one coaching clients. Like, for example, I used to have my account. So my one-on-one coaching clients have a private link to my diary and they can book in their calls with me so that they can see their own diary against mine. And for ages, I just had it like a free-for-all in that it was always open. And because I work with people all over the world, sometimes I was getting calls being booked for like 4 a.m. or something like that. And I would be really resentful and angry for it. And I'm just like, oh, like I just got no balance and no, they're not respecting my time. And I'm like, no, you're not respecting your time, Claire. Like, and so and then this fear of like, oh, well, what if I'm not available to them when they need me? When the reality is like people will make it work. Like when you give people too many options, that as well can make it difficult. Whereas if you're just like, I'm available these days, these times, no, I've not lost anybody out of saying these are my coaching days, these are my coaching times, these are the days that I work with organizations. I don't work that day. Um, nobody's died over it. I haven't lost anybody out of it, and I feel better for it. Um, so I think other exceptions, of course. So we're not saying we're perfect, but I think if you can have a like 80% of the time, this is how I operate, but still have the flexibility and agility for when the goalposts do shift or we need to move, you're able to balance things better for sure.
Mm. Yeah, 100%. I think learning to set boundaries as a people pleaser, as a perfectionist is a huge lesson, but a really, really important one so that you can show up as your
Yeah.
best self.
Yeah. Spot on. Spot on.
So, as a successful female entrepreneur, how do you see your role in empowering other women in the business world? Now, I understand obviously because you work for yourself now, it's probably a little bit different, but maybe think back to when you were working in a corporation with a team. How do you feel as though your role? Oh no, sorry. What's a better way of wording that? Like, how do you see your role in empowering other women that you work with in a
Yeah.
workplace setting?
Yeah. I see it, well, both if I was in an organization and even just in my
Mm,
business as being the same thing. I
yeah,
see
very
my
true.
job, I see my job as being how can I make it easier for the women coming like
Hmm.
behind me? And because I think sometimes there's still this tendency I observe for women who have had it tough and they have no question about it. But I see this tendency sometimes for like, well, I had it tough, so you should too.
Hmm.
And I just don't see how that is helpful. Like I don't see, I have so much empathy for how hard it was for some women in certain industries and organizations to get up there. Like the door was just, they had to push it open. But now that we're opening it, shouldn't it be our job to make it easier to bring more and more people
Mm.
up with us without having to go through the same pain and sadness and frustration and isolation and exclusion that we did. So I think for me, that would be the driving force, is like, how do we make it easier for other women? And how do we bring, there's no cap on awesomeness. So like, I can be awesome, you can be awesome, they can be awesome. How do we create a space where we can be that without this mindset of like, you need to do your time, or you need to experience what I experienced to really get it. Yeah, I think that's what I see as my role.
For sure. I think there's a responsibility on all women who progress in their career and kind of move up into those more senior positions to try as best as they can to repair that broken rung and not leave it broken and be like, well, I had to, do my time. So therefore you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's enough seats at the table.
Yeah. And if there's not, okay, that's the reality. Maybe there's not. So what can we do to get more? But it isn't kicking you down.
Yeah. On an organizational level, what are some ways that an organization can foster that more inclusive, supportive environment for women in leadership and women moving into leadership as well?
Yeah, I think I had this conversation last week with CEOs for gender equity, and my response will be the same. I think we cannot do it alone. We being women, we cannot do it alone. So, don't get me wrong, I love me a room full of women at lunch. Love anything to do with that, and those spaces have a place, but we actually can't drive meaningful change without men involved. They are half the population. So I think that we need to continue to find ways to drive better allyship from men inside organizations, better advocacy, because advocacy and allyship from men is what it's going to take to get it done. So that would be the thing that I would say. And then I think also a bigger focus and promotion of women in leadership positions inside organizations, because it's one thing to have all these initiatives that are driving women into organizations in entry-level positions. But if when they look up, they don't see anything, they're going to start thinking, well, there's actually nowhere for me to go. So it's not an either or, it's both. But I particularly think there needs to be more emphasis on getting and keeping and developing women in organizations in leadership positions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to that broken rung issue. It's not just
what
are you doing personally as an organization? How are you fixing the broken rung?
Yeah, that's right. And every individual has the capacity to do that. I think that sometimes we think, oh, this problem's so much bigger than me. And yes, it is a big problem. But if every individual just did one thing to help, we'd solve the problem a hell of a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that saying that if you think that one individual is not enough to make a difference, you should spend a night sleeping with a mosquito and see what one individual can do.
Yeah, totally. Or like, I love all of those things. I was going to say the baby shark one. It's like saying, I'm too small to make an impact. It's like a baby shark is still a shark. Like at your feet, you're still going to run. We all can have an impact.
Yeah. It is, I think, really important to remember your own power and that we all have a shared responsibility. Okay, so I would love to talk a little bit more about your future vision. So, of course, one thing that we touched on, but I'd love to speak to more if you're allowed to, is your book, but also just future aspirations, plans you have for your career, your businesses, and kind of where you're taking it from here.
Yeah. So yes, as you know, so as at the time of recording, what are we, the 1st of May, I submitted my manuscript to my publisher yesterday, which was its due date. So I'm very excited that I will have a new book coming out, hitting bookstores, airports, online bookstores, on the 27th of August. So not very far away. So that is super exciting. I'm not going to share the title yet because I'll be doing a little bit of promo around that. But the book is essentially around this idea of busyness and hustle culture that's kept us overwhelmed, stressed, and unfulfilled in organizations for too long. And what can we as the individual do about it for ourselves? So it is a book targeted largely towards early and mid-career professionals and emerging leaders who want to find a way and be given the tools and the strategies to do so, to show up in their careers feeling seen, feeling valued, feeling fulfilled without having to sell their souls, basically, is what the book's about. So that's very exciting. In terms of the future vision for my business, I am really focused on just getting that the book out there. Obviously, I'm very excited to be doing more speaking. So whether it's at conferences for organizations, whether it's through leadership development programs, workshops, etc. I love working with middle managers, emerging leaders, career professionals, and just helping them be the best that they can be, because we know that organizations perform better when we have employees in them that are performing at their best. And when we can perform at our best when we have the tools to do so. So things like self-awareness, curiosity, lifelong learning, motivation, agility, resilience, all of those things. How do we cultivate those in a world that is not slowing down anytime soon? Do we bow out and hope it all goes away? It's one strategy, probably not the right one. Or do we think about how we can build a career and a life where we can still get what we want at work and be happy at the same time? So that's sort of a real focus for me. And I think, just to be honest, in terms of a vision, it's really about doing good work with good people in a way that feels good. So whether that is online, whether it's on stage, whether it's at in-person events in Perth, over East, overseas, if it's an organization that's motivated to really do the right thing by its employees to grow, then I'm all in.
I love that. It's really choosing values aligned work is kind of what I'm hearing from you. So going back to your values of like humility, connectedness, hunger, all of those things.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And life's too short to do work you don't want to do with people you don't want to do it with. Really.
So true. Oh, that's amazing. Okay, we've got a little rapid fire round now. So don't think too much about these answers.
Okay.
First thing that just comes to mind. So first, favorite book that has influenced your journey?
Crikey. Can I say two? Because two came to my mind.
Yeah.
Okay. The first one was a book called Not Just Lucky by Jamila Rizvi. I read that a number of years ago, and that really just changed the way women in particular talk about our achievements. I'm just lucky to be here. I'm just lucky. No, you're not just lucky. You're damn good at what you do. So Not Just Lucky by Jamila Rizvi. And then a book called The Life Plan by Shana Kennedy was a book that I first opened about 9 years ago. And it was like a real practical kind of hands-on book around basically what is important to you in your life, what gets you up in the morning, what's important to you. And that was a real catalyst for me, because that was the first book that I picked up that started this journey for me around what are your values? How do you want to bring that to life through the work that you do? And that was the thing that started me on my journey, for sure.
Oh, that's incredible. Definitely need to check those ones out. If you right now could go back and speak to young Claire, who has just enrolled in her accounting course because she was told that she was very good at accounting, so she should be doing that. If there's one piece of advice you could give to her, what would you say?
think my advice would be, my advice probably wouldn't be about the accounting and finance piece. She worked that out on her own, but it would be, well, two things. Bangs are not a good look for you, Claire. Um, and I think secondly, it would be don't take yourself so seriously. Like,
Mm,
put so much pressure on ourselves to think we have to look like we have it all together. And I think the
mm,
saddest part of all is that when we do that, we actually squash the very best parts of ourselves. And that is what
mm,
Claire did. I don't want to talk about myself in the third person, but that is what young Claire did for
mm.
too long, by thinking I needed to fit a certain mold to be successful in my career. Um, yeah, that's what I would say. Don't take yourself so seriously. You don't need to.
Beautiful advice. And if you could have dinner with any female entrepreneur, female leader, living or deceased, who would it be and why?
Oh, oh, uh, I would have to say Oprah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd have to catch up. I'd have to hang with Oprah, I think, for sure. 'Cause I just have so many questions about her life journey, her experiences. She's lived a life in the public eye for so long. She's had her setbacks splashed upon TV, torn apart. She's had her vulnerability taken advantage of so many times, but she's just like gotten up and kept going every single
Mm,
time. So I think her, or I don't know, you said I could only have one, but her or Melanie Perkins, who's the founder of Canva,
mm,
Perth Gal. Um, I'd have so many questions for her as well. And I would love to have a chat with her.
mm. Yeah, Oprah in particular, a very resilient woman, and Melanie, she's just brilliant, brilliant
Yeah.
mind.
So cool.
Yeah, I love that. All right, just to finish us off, because obviously we're going to be hopefully having some wonderful emerging female leaders watching this video. So, what's one key message that you want them to take away from this chat that we've had?
Well, one key message would be you've got to go out and get your opportunities too. Don't sit back, wait, hope that someone will give it to you. Go out and get it. And this portal, this alumni gives you a community of brilliant women who are here wholly and solely to support you. It would
Mm,
be a damn shame to waste that opportunity. So I think that would
mm,
be my message is you can sit back and wait and hope, or you can get out, you can ask questions, you can meet people, you can build relationships, and those opportunities will come.
mm. Yeah, 100%. And if they haven't already, but they might have through just going through the program, where can our audience go and connect with you and follow your
Um,
journey apart from
y-
put in their calendars 27th of August for your book launch?
yeah. The probably best places are LinkedIn. So if you just look up
Mhm.
Claire Seeber on LinkedIn, am fairly visible on that. Or Instagram at Eating Your Cake 2 is my kind of more businessy account where I give sort of tips, advice, guidance, podcasts, all those sorts of things. Or my website, which is claireseeber.com.au.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Claire. Really appreciate your time. Could speak to you about your journey and all of your wisdom and knowledge for hours and hours. But I do understand that you've got other things to attend to. So thank you so much again.
That's all right. I have loved this chat. Thank you very much, Aimee, for being the hostess with the mostest.
No problem.